went behind James Gunn's back like that and took a meeting with Zack Snyder to pitch a Batman project. Hey everybody, Colton here, and we've got a question from Carson. Carson writes, Colton, what do you think about this report that Zack Snyder has pitched a Batman movie to Netflix that would be R-rated and in the same vein as his Watchmen movie? I've attached a link below, okay? This seems a little... I'm not sure that it's real. I'll say that. But let's pretend for a second that maybe it is, and talk about it. So we know that Zack Snyder had a relationship, right, with Netflix. He did his Rebel Moon movies. I have not seen the Rebel Moon movies, so I'm not going to cast judgment on the Rebel Moon movies. But from what I have heard, not great. Okay, that's what I'll say. And Netflix, if I'm remembering correctly from reports I've read, they're not moving forward with any more like stuff with Zack Snyder. And can I just say, because I know you guys have, not you guys, but the haters who hate watch probably are already commenting, oh, Colton's a Snyder hater. He hates the DCEU. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, he's a gun glazer and all. I love Man of Steel. I like Snyder's, what was that recent movie that he did on Netflix? The zombie movie, was it, I can't remember. He did Dawn of the Dead, and then he did that other one that takes place in Vegas. The name's escaping me, but I really liked that one, the one with Dave Bautista. I thought that was a really great movie. Well, you know, for what it was. So I think that he's a very talented director. Loved Man of Steel. Did not like Batman v Superman. That's no secret. Not a fan of Batman v Superman. Not a fan of either version of Justice League. And I do think that Zack Snyder and perhaps even more so, the lack of management and cohesiveness and vision and the changing of hands all the time, and in terms of who was in charge of the DCU or DCEU, excuse me, at that time, it was a clusterfuck, and they put out way more shit than they did quality. Okay, so like I said, I liked Man of Steel. Didn't like Batman v Superman. I'm not big on either version of Justice League. And then you have all the other stuff that Zack Snyder's not even related to, that gets, you know, deemed part of this Snyder-Verse, like Wonder Woman, which is actually pretty good, Suicide Squad, and the various other DCEU films that came post-Justice League that were, you know, at that time, Snyder was out. He was out. And did he get pushed out? You know, probably. And I think the smart move probably would have been to just let Snyder, if he wanted to, finish Justice League his way. Don't release a 4-hour theatrical cut of Justice League. But I think bringing in Joss Whedon in hindsight probably wasn't smart. Should have just let Snyder finish his movie. And I think that they may have kind of... They used, and I'm not saying they as in Snyder and his wife, I believe, is it Deborah Snyder, and she's his partner in filmmaking as well. I think Warner Brothers kind of used Snyder's daughter tragically passing away as an excuse for Snyder to step away when they were already kind of planning to push him away. And what's unfortunate about that as well is that, if I'm remembering right, I think Snyder wanted to do a proper Man of Steel 2 before doing Batman v Superman, but it was Warner Brothers who was like, no, we want to do this. And so, you know, he was like, okay, and he did it. And like I said, and I'll say it a third time, not a big fan of Batman v Superman. I think that really tanked the DCEU, and it really never came back to life. And that's why it was so important that when James Gunn came in, it was just time to reset things. And as a guy who adores Henry Cavill as Superman, it was time. It was time to move on. They had driven the thing into the ground. And not Snyder. Snyder wasn't even involved at this point, but they just kept tanking this universe, and no one cared about it anymore. No one cared about the DCEU anymore. Now, of course, I'm being a little hyperbolic when I say no one. There's this loud minority who loves the DCEU and loves Zack Snyder. But for the most part, the audience had abandoned it. So there's the backstory on that. I'm not a Snyder hater. I don't like some of his stuff. I do like some of his stuff. I think he's a talented filmmaker. Not crazy about how he kind of embraces his cult following, who are some less than savory type people. Now, having said all that, let's talk about the Batman of it all. Ben Affleck's Batman. I could make the argument he's the best Batman we've gotten. He's not been Batman in really any good movies. He never got his own, and that was a movie that I really wish we had gotten, The Batman, written and directed and starring Ben Affleck. But that never happened. And now we have The Batman with Robert Pattinson that's disconnected from the DCEU. And we know that we are getting Batman, the Brave and the Bold for the DCEU, which will not be the Robert Pattinson Batman. It will be a whole new DCU Batman. And I've actually said that if James Gunn is looking to cast a middle-aged Batman with a Damian Wayne, as his son, which is what they're doing with Brave and the Bold, Ben Affleck, I would not be mad if they said, hey, we're still going to have Ben Affleck play Batman. Is that going to happen? No. It's probably going to be the guy from The Housemaid. But I do want to be clear that I really liked Ben Affleck's Batman. I think it's a shame that he never got to make his Batman movie, never got a Batman movie. I think that's all a shame, and I would not be mad if they kept him around. I mean, they're keeping other pieces of the DCEU around. So I don't think it would be the craziest thing to keep his Batman around. It's not going to happen, but I wouldn't be mad about it. As far as this story that Carson sends us, this rumor that Snyder has pitched a Watchmen-style solo Batfleck movie to Netflix, this is, of course, going off of the Netflix buying Warner Brothers. And even though Ellison, he's not taking no for an answer, he's still bitching and moaning, and it's just getting pathetic at this point. All the whining he's doing and pleading to shareholders that, he didn't win this bidding war. Dude, you've got the money to end this thing if you want it that bad. So you must not want it that bad. Stop all this like begging that you're doing. It's making you look weak. Move on. You've got Paramount. Go make some good movies with the IP you have. Anyway, that's not what this video is about. This rumor is based on the idea that Netflix is going to be getting Warner Brothers, and that Netflix has a prior relationship, of course, with Zack Snyder, and that Zack Snyder is pretty much, if this is true, kind of pussyfooting around and going around James Gunn, the head of DC Studios, and going directly to Netflix, not even a Warner Brother exec, to pitch his idea for an R-rated Batman movie that would be on Netflix. Now, I'm not so sure. Here in this picture, it says pitched a Watchmen-style solo Batfleck movie to Netflix. I feel like I read another report or rumor that said something along the lines of he was interested in doing a Batman movie that wasn't even connected to his prior universe, not connected to the Snyder-Verse or the DCEU, and perhaps wouldn't even star Ben Affleck. It would just be like this other Batman story, like this R-rated solo Batman movie that he wants to make. Look, would I watch it? Sure. But here's the thing. Here's why it's not going to happen and why we just need to stop. Just please, for the love of God. One, and this is in no particular order. One, this is not how things are done. James Gunn is the head of DC Studios. And if Netflix went behind James Gunn's back like that and took a meeting with Zack Snyder to pitch a Batman project and didn't involve James Gunn, is it their right as the owner to do that? Sure. But it's not done. That's not right. Okay? That's not something you do. And James Gunn would have every right to say, you know what? Fuck you. I'm out. Because when you hire someone to be your studio head, to work for your studio and produce a product for you, you are putting that trust in them, and they're delivering work for you to make you money. And in return, and the studios know this, and I don't know that Netflix would do this, but in return, you are to give that person a level of respect and letting things, you don't let people go over their head. It's very inappropriate to let someone go over the head of your studio head to come directly to, someone who's above them. And that can really turn off an even higher up if they see you going around to get directly to them. So I think Netflix has been in this business long enough to know that one, and I think Zack Snyder has as well, to know that one, that's just not done. You do not do that. If Zack Snyder has already pitched this idea to James Gunn, because we know they're kind of friendly and they talk, and James Gunn turned down the idea because, oh, shocker, maybe he doesn't want to have 3 different Batmans going at once because we've already got the Batman. We've got the Batman for the DCEU and then another Batman or whatever. It's too much. And if James Gunn said no to that and Zack Snyder then were to go around his back and pitch it to James Gunn's bosses, little shitty. But what would be even more shitty is if Netflix or whoever were to then say, sure, yeah, let's do it. It won't be connected to DC Studios or anything. We'll just produce it here at Netflix, a Netflix Batman movie. It won't be connected to DC Studios, James Gunn. We're just going to we'll let you do it. Go ahead. James Gunn would have every right to get up and walk out. And maybe he would. And then maybe Netflix would say, okay, well, we'll put Zack Snyder in charge. And you know what? As much as I like a lot of Snyder stuff and think he's a talented guy, that would be a horrible mistake. Because his universe failed. His movies are not for everybody, especially his DC movies. And I say that as a fan of Man of Steel. Love Man of Steel. But Batman v Superman just wasn't good, man. Justice League, both versions, not good, in my opinion. And that might not be your opinion, but listen, it was most people's opinion. And this is a business. Movies are made to make money. That's why the studios are making the movies. They're not making them because they have a love for the arts. They're making them to make money. And that is why, even though I was getting a little worked up there for a second in this hypothetical, Netflix would never do this. Netflix is not going to put Zack Snyder in charge of anything. They're not going to backstab their golden goose that is James Gunn, who has resurrected the DC movie universe and resurrected this brand and this franchise to put in the guy that crashed it into the ground, or to continue with stories or a vibe that others, after even Snyder left, continued to crash it even further into the ground. That's not what they're going to do. Superman proved successful. Peacemaker proved successful. Supergirl will prove successful. And they're going to stick with that. This isn't going to happen. No chance in hell it happens. No R-rated Netflix Batman movie directed by Zack Snyder. Sorry. It's just not going to happen because I don't think James Gunn is going to let it happen. And I think if James Gunn doesn't want it to happen, then Netflix is going to respect that and not have it happen. And it's probably for the best. And some of you might be asking, well, what would the harm be? What's the harm in just letting him do it? Well, because it's a part of a brand. And James Gunn's in the middle of establishing a brand and training the general audience for this is what we're doing now. This is the story we're telling. This is what we're building to. And you don't throw too many wrenches into this moving cog of a machine, right? I probably butchered that expression. But the bottom line is there's just no place for it. Not right now. So there are my thoughts on that. Now, I also wanted to talk about a rumor I saw that James Gunn might just direct Brave and the Bold himself, Batman Brave and the Bold. I think Andy Muschietti, who directed, of course, the It films and Welcome to Derry and The Flash, a movie that I get a lot of shit for saying that I really like. I do, however, admit that it completely fell apart in the third act. But the first 2 acts of that movie, really solid. That James Gunn might be directing it. Maybe even writing it. James Gunn was hired to be the head of the studio, which means managing the studio, not making every single movie they make. And so far, up until we get Supergirl, Every released DCU project has been done by James Gunn. He did Peacemaker, he did Creature Commandos, he did Superman, and Supergirl will be our first non-James Gunn project, despite it feeling very James Gunn, but it will be our first non-James Gunn project. And that's good. James Gunn's a super talented writer-director, and I am glad that he is setting the tone, and I hope he continues to make movies in this universe. He's doing the Superman sequel, the Superman, or I don't know that it's a sequel, but Superman Man of Tomorrow, right, is what it's called. How do you say that's not a sequel? Or is it not called Superman Man of Tomorrow? Is it just called Man of Tomorrow? Anyway, I think it's called Superman Man of Tomorrow, and it's going to be a fucking sequel to Superman. But he's doing that. I am not opposed to the idea of James Gunn doing Brave and the Bold. I'm not opposed to that at all. I do wonder why, if you've got a talented director and I think writer, right? Andy Muschietti, he didn't write Flash, I don't think, but I think he writes on like Welcome to Dairy. I can't remember. But when you have Andy Muschietti there, why remove him to do it? And you could make the argument of, well, I'm just setting the stage, setting the tone, building this universe, and then we're going to kind of let everybody, go do their own thing and just, get this thing running, and then I'll start delegating. Sure, but if you get this whole thing running yourself and then just immediately delegate to everyone else, you've got a problem where quality could take a serious drop. So I think from the top, you need to start training this system to run already from the jump, with you overseeing and executive producing these movies, having a heavy hand in them, but having other writers and directors, because Gunn himself has said that this is a very, very, very stressful, busy job where there just aren't enough hours in the day for him to do everything he needs to do. So if maybe that means that, I believe it's Peter Safran is his co-CEO, maybe if that means he needs to take on a bigger role in terms of running the studio, and Gunn wants to serve as like a chief creative officer or something like that, so he can really just do the filmmaking aspect of this franchise. Maybe that's the case, but remain as a co-CEO so he can make like final decisions and stuff. Maybe so. But maybe his active role needs to be less in the vein of a Kevin Feige and more in the vein of like I'm trying to think of I think for a while, Dave Filoni, who's now a co-CEO of Lucasfilm, he was like the he was the chief creative officer, right, at Lucasfilm for a bit, right? Not that that's a great example, but that's more James Gunn's wheelhouse, and that's what he was hired to do, was to do the creative part, and Safran kind of do the more business aspect of running a studio. And I think Gunn is qualified for that because he knows what works, and he has a good, hand on the pulse of finger on the pulse of the audience. But I think he is also very let me do it, and I'm that way, and I have no issue with that. George Lucas was that way. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I do think James Gunn he's a very involved filmmaker. And that can be a blessing and that can be a curse. So while I am okay with him doing Brave and the Bold, I'd be totally fine if he does the Superman sequel and then does Brave and the Bold. I'm totally cool with that. But I hope it's not setting the DCU up for failure if James Gunn's plan is to pretty much do phase 1 of the DCEU, and then step away and let others continue with what he built. Maybe that is a good way of doing it. Have somebody come in and do the heavy lifting and correct the course, and then let everyone else take that blueprint and run with it. Maybe that'll work, and maybe that'll make it to where Gunn then doesn't just step away completely, but can just take a step back and then do less projects. And maybe right now he just feels the need. I first need to establish this thing, and that means I'm going to have a really, really busy and difficult couple of years here, or few years here. But then I'll be able to take a step back a little and serve more in the role of which I was hired for. Maybe that's the case. But there are my thoughts on that. Thank you for the question, Carson. I appreciate it. If you guys want to get your question answered here on the show, possibly, you can submit it at AskColtonNow@gmail.com. And yeah, there's not going to be a Zack Snyder Batman movie on Netflix. Sorry. It's not. I'm not sorry. It's not going to happen. Doesn't need to happen. Ben Affleck's probably not ever going to play Batman again, even though I would be down for him playing Batman and Brave and the Bold. But that's just also probably not going to happen. I don't even think Ben Affleck at this point would be interested in it. It's time to move on. We just need to stop. Okay, stop. Time to Stop. You're still holding on. Let go. All right. I love you guys. I'll see you soon.